Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me.
The sky above the city of Valoria shimmered with a strange, shifting light. The sprawling metropolis, a testament to the combined ingenuity of countless civilizations, stood at the heart of the multiracial alliance. Towering spires of crystal and steel reached up into the atmosphere, their tips crackling with magical energy drawn from the planet's core. The city had seen many wars, many conflicts, but none like the one approaching now. The air itself seemed to tremble with an unnatural tension, as if the planet knew what was coming. Inside the council hall, the most secure and sacred chamber in Valoria, President Rex stood at the head of a long, crescent-shaped table. His eyes, sharp and resolute, scanned the faces of the Alliance leaders seated before him. They were a mix of races: tall, elegant elves with eyes like stars, broad-shouldered dwarves whose stone-like skin gleamed under the soft light, and the delicate, almost ethereal forms of the gorillas, beings composed of living light. Each of them represented a vast faction of the Alliance, but today they all wore the same expression: fear. "The Nihilites are at our doorstep," Rex began, his voice steady and calm. "Their fleet is on the outskirts of our solar system, and our defenses have already suffered catastrophic losses." The room fell into a heavy silence. The Nihilites, an alien race that seemed more a force of nature than a civilization, had been tearing through the outer territories of the Alliance for months. They brought with them darkness, an all-consuming void that devoured light, life, and magic. No one knew where they came from or what they wanted, only that they destroyed everything in their path. "We need to consider evacuation," one of the elven leaders, Uranus, said. His long silver hair was pulled back tightly, his face a mask of controlled desperation. "If we don't move our people to the far colonies, there will be no one left to save." "Evacuation won't save us," Rex replied, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "The Nihilites will find us, no matter how far we run." "They consume everything." "And what do you propose, then?" snapped Valra, the dwarven emissary. Her stone-gray eyes locked onto Rex, challenging him. "We've thrown everything we have at the Ama, our fleets, our strongest magics, and nothing has worked." Rex took a deep breath, his gaze sweeping the room. "There is one last option," he said. "An ancient ritual, a spell so powerful that it can imprison the Nihilites in a rift between space and time." The room erupted into murmurs, the various leaders exchanging uneasy glances. Ancient magic was dangerous, unpredictable, and often required a price few were willing to pay. "You're talking about the rite of severance," said Alara, the ruler's leader, her voice a soft hum that reverberated in the air. "A spell not used in millennia." "Are you truly prepared to do what that spell requires?" Rex met her glowing, translucent eyes. "I am." The room fell silent once more. Everyone knew what the rite of severance demanded: the life of the one who cast it. The caster would be bound to the rift along with the enemy, trapped in the endless void for all eternity. It was the ultimate sacrifice, and only a leader with the strength of will and heart could even attempt such magic. "I've studied the ancient texts," Rex continued. "The ritual will work. It's our last chance to protect the Alliance, to save all of us." "And what will become of you?" asked Uranus quietly, though he already knew the answer. Rex straightened his posture, his dark eyes resolute. "I will not survive." Valra slammed her fist on the table, the sound echoing through the chamber. "There must be another way." "You are the president of humanity, the leader of our strongest military force. Without you, the Alliance will fall apart." Rex shook his head. "Without me, the Alliance will survive. Without the Nihilites, we will prosper. My life is a small price to pay for the future of all our worlds." The leaders fell into a somber silence. Rex could see the battle playing out on each of their faces, as the internal war between accepting his sacrifice and fighting for another way, no matter how hopeless. But deep down, they all knew that this was their only option. Alara spoke first, her voice like a soft melody cutting through the stillness. "I will support you, Rex." "The rulers will provide the necessary energy to fuel the ritual." Uranus, His lips tight, nodded slowly. The elves will offer our aid as well. If this is the only way, then we must do what is necessary. One by one, the leaders of the alliance voiced their agreement. Though none of them could hide the sorrow in their eyes, they were about to lose their greatest ally, their most brilliant leader, and there was no victory sweet enough to make up for that loss. Rex bowed his head slightly in gratitude. Thank you, your support means more to me than you know. As the council adjourned, Rex found himself alone in the great hall. The others had left to prepare for the coming battle, to secure their planets, their people. But Rex's mind was elsewhere. His thoughts drifted to the past, to the path that had brought him here. He had always known that his role as leader would demand great things from him, but never had he imagined it would require his life. Yet there was no doubt in his heart, this was what he had been preparing for, all along. His entire life had been a series of lessons in leadership, sacrifice, and the greater good. Now, it was time to put all of that into action. As Rex left the hall, he was met by his closest friend and advisor, Mara. She was a tall, imposing figure, her sharp features softened only by the concern in her bright green eyes. "You're really going to do this, aren't you?" she asked, her voice heavy with emotion. "I have to, Mara," Rex replied, placing a hand on her shoulder. "There's no other way. You're the best leader we've ever had. Humanity needs you." Rex smiled sadly. "Humanity needs peace, more than it needs me. If I do this, they'll have that peace." Mara looked away, blinking back tears. She had always been the strong one, the unflinching warrior who had fought by Rex's side in countless battles. But these a broken bar. This was a fight she couldn't win. "I'm going with you," she said firmly. Rex shook his head. I need you here, Mara. The Alliance will need someone to guide them once I'm gone. You've always been the strongest of us. You can help them heal, help them rebuild." Mara's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. She knew Rex was right, even if it tore her apart to admit it. "Then let me at least see you through the ritual," she said quietly. Rex nodded. Of course. The next day, preparations began in earnest. The leaders of the Alliance worked in concert to gather the ancient artifacts needed to perform the rite of severance. The ritual itself would take place in the heart of Valoria, at the Nexusa, an ancient site of power where the magical energies of the planet converged. As the sun set on the final day of preparation, Rex stood alone at the Nexus, staring up at the swirling vortex of energy above. The air was thick with magic, the very fabric of reality bending and shifting around the sacred stones. This was where he would make his stand, where he would give his life for the future of the Alliance. He had no fear, only resolve. Mara approached quietly, standing at his side. "Everything is ready," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Rex nodded. "Then it's time." The leaders of the Alliance gathered around the perimeter of the Nexus, their faces grim as they watched Rex step into the center of the circle. Ancient runes carved into the stone began to glow, the air crackling with power as the ritual commenced. Rex raised his arms, chanting the words of the ancient spell. The ground beneath him trembled, the sky darkened, and the winds howled as the magic took hold. The air around Rex crackled with energy, the ancient runes beneath his feet glowing brighter as the ritual progressed. His voice remained steady, unwavering, despite the immense power surging through his body. The wind whipped around him, howling as though it sought to tear him apart, but Rex stood firm. His entire being was focused on the task at hand. At the ceiling of the Nihilites, the invaders who had brought death and destruction to the Alliance's worlds. This was his moment. The ground trembled, and a deep rumble resonated from the core of the Nexus. Above him, the sky swirled with a vortex of magical energy, the colors dark and shifting as if the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. The Nihilites were coming. He could feel their presence, the void they carried with them. It was a cold, consuming emptiness, threatening to swallow everything in its path. But Rex would not let them. Sweat dripped down his brow, the strain of the ritual beginning to take its toll on his body. His muscles ached, and his chest burned with each breath. The magic demanded more of him, pulling at the very essence of his being. This was the price he had always known he would pay. As the last incantation left his lips, the air around him exploded with light. A shock wave of energy rippled outward from the nexus, knocking the assembled leaders of the Alliance off their feet. Mara, who had been standing closest, shielded her eyes from the blinding light, her heart pounding in her chest. She could see Rex in the center of the storm, his figure illuminated by the pulsating magic, but he seemed so far away, already fading from this world. The Nihilites' approach quickened. Their void energy clashed with the ancient magic Rex had summoned, a titanic battle of forces beyond comprehension. The sky itself seemed to tear open as the Nihilites, massive and formless, descended upon the Nexus. They were drawn to the rift, to the power Rex was wielding, and they sought to consume it, to consume him. But Rex was ready. With a final, earth-shaking cry, he released the last of his strength into the spell. The rift opened, a tear in space and time that yawned wide above him, pulling everything toward it with an irresistible force. The Nihilites screamed as though their cries were not sounds, but the absence of sound, a terrible silence that seemed to crush the soul. The vortex swallowed them whole. The void energy that had once threatened to consume the Alliance was pulled into the rift, sealed away in a prison between dimensions. The Nihilites were gone, trapped forever in a place where neither time nor space held meaning. Rex staggered, his legs buckling beneath him, his vision blurred, and he felt the weight of the world lifting from his shoulders. The rift was closing, its job done. But so, too, was his. He could feel his essence being drawn into the tear, his body growing lighter, his consciousness slipping away. In his final moments, Rex turned his gaze to the sky, now calm and clear once more. A sense of peace washed over him. The Alliance was safe. His people were safe. This was the future he had fought for, the future he had sacrificed everything to protect. Mara watched in horror as Rex's body began to dissolve, his form breaking apart like dust in the wind, carried toward the closing rift. Tears streamed down her face, but she did not call out. She knew this was what he had chosen. This was his fate. And then, in a flash of light, he was gone. The Nexus fell silent. The wind died down, the sky returned to its national hue, and the world stood still, as if holding its breath. The leaders of the Alliance slowly got to their feet, their faces pale and drawn. They had just witnessed something extraordinary, something that would be spoken of for generations to come. But for now, all they could feel was the immense weight of loss. Mara stood at the edge of the circle, staring at the spot where Rex had once stood. The tears had stopped, but the ache in her chest remained, a hollow, gnawing pain that she knew would never fully heal. Rex had been more than just her president, he had been her friend, her ally, her brother in arms. And now he was gone. The leaders of the Alliance gathered around her, their faces somber. Uranus, the elven leader, placed a hand on her shoulder. His sacrifice will not be forgotten, he said quietly. Mara nodded, though the words brought little comfort. He gave everything for us, she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. We owe it to him to make sure it wasn't in vain. Valra, the dwarven leader, stepped forward, her stone-like face softened by grief. We will rebuild, she said firmly. We will honor his memory by making this alliance stronger than ever. The others nodded in agreement. They had all lost something today, but they had also gained a future, real one that Rex had secured with his life. Over the next few days, the Alliance began the process of recovery. The immediate threat of the Nihilites was gone, but the scars of their invasion remained. Cities lay in ruins, families mourned the dead, and entire planets had been devastated by the war. But amid the grief, there was also hope. Rex's sacrifice had not only saved the Alliance from destruction, but it had also united its people in a way that nothing else could have. Humanity, once considered a junior member of the Alliance, now stood at its forefront, leading the way toward a new era of peace and prosperity. Mara took on the mantle of leadership in Rex's absence, Though it was a role she accepted with a heavy heart, she had never wanted to let Rex had been the one with the vision, the wisdom, the strength. But now, in his honor, she would do what needed to be done. In the center of Valoria, a monument was erected in Rex's memory. It was a towering structure, made of the finest crystal and etched with the ancient runes of the Rite of Severance. At its base was a simple plaque that read, Rex, President of Humanity, Leader, Friend, Hero. He gave his life so that we might live. The monument became a place of pilgrimage, not just for humans, but for all members of the Alliance. People from every corner of the galaxy came to pay their respects, to honor the man who had given everything for the future of their worlds. The story of Rex's sacrifice spread like wildfire, becoming legend. And as the years passed, the Alliance flourished. Under Mara's guidance, the various races worked together to rebuild what had been lost. Trade routes reopened, cities were restored, and the bonds between the Alliance's members grew stronger than ever before. Humanity, once seen as the youngest and least experienced of the Alliance's races, was now its guiding light. Rex's legacy lived on in the hearts of his people, in the laws they passed, in the treaties they forged. His name was spoken with reverence, his sacrifice remembered as the turning point that had saved them all. But for Mara, there was no true peace. She carried the weight of Rex's loss with her always, a shadow that lingered no matter how bright the future seemed. In the quiet moments, when the day's work was done and the stars filled the sky, she would find herself standing before his monument, her heart heavy with grief and gratitude. "Thank you, Rex," she would whisper, her voice barely audible in the night. "I'll keep the promise I made to you, I'll keep them safe." And in those moments, she felt his presence beside her, not as a ghost, but as a memory, a reminder of the man who had given his all for the future of the Alliance. The man who had made the ultimate choice, the man who had ensured that they would live.